Thank you very much, Jim, for asking me to do this. It was really a surprise, honestly. Um, so every time I sat down this week to write this piece on the importance of education in my life, I had to stop moments later. I kept starting these little treatises and rants about an underfunded public school system where resources are distributed inequitably and regressively, about a private college system that has slowly morphed from being merely aristocratic and elitist to being essentially a debt leveraging Ponzi scheme, about that, all of that. That's been the whole week. And I didn't want to write that because that's not what's important about education. So I had trouble writing anything. But what kept coming back to my head was a joke. And it goes, for Halloween, I'm dressing up as a former gifted and talented kid. I'm wearing my normal clothes, and when people ask, who are you supposed to be? I'll say, I was supposed to be a lot of things. And so I was in a gifted and talented program in grade school. I was told that I was particularly bright and that what would help a shy, sad boy like me who had trouble making friends was to be conspicuously pulled out of class 3 times a week and kept away from his other classmates. This made me more sad and I think less smart. From there, I applied and was accepted to a magnet middle school where they stopped telling me how bright I was and started asking why I wasn't trying harder. My depression was getting worse. I was diagnosed with ADD at the end of 7th grade. When I sheepishly told my algebra teacher this after a bad semester, she replied with a scoff and a roll of her eyes. Ashamed and bitter, I stopped taking the Ritalin and renounced my diagnosis. Barely got into the magnet high school, limped through, deciding that however bright I might have seemed, I was decidedly lazy, unmotivated, and inattentive. So I got into theater. There, I was still surrounded by these students that seemed destined to be engineers, programmers, lawyers, actually smart people. So I wouldn't have gone to college, except that I was always going to go to college. My mother has a PhD, that this is her thesis right here. It's titled Attentional Control and Linguistic and Non-Linguistic Performance. I've tried to read it 3 times. I will never succeed. Um, my sister was in the process of getting her doctorate from Yale. More actually smart people. So I ended up going to Hampshire College. If you don't know it, it's an experimental college where you build your own degree with no grades and only narrative evaluations. This meant that the student body, with rare exception, was a beautifully self-selected group of kids with ADD and kids on the autism spectrum. This is where education finally got important, because Hampshire taught me how to teach myself. I started to connect dots. I remembered that when I was getting pulled out of class in 2nd grade, I was one of maybe 3 white kids in the room. And everyone in the gifted and talented room was white. When I went to high school, it was actually at the high school that I would have gone to if I hadn't gotten into a magnet school, but I was on the 2nd story where most of the kids were white. I kept thinking about this, about these inequities, and thinking about beyond that, beyond race, beyond gender. I thought about my sister, who was fastidious to the point of obsession. She missed valedictorian in high school by 1 spot, and I think at the age of 36, with a PhD, a wife, and 3 kids, I think that still bugs her. I thought about my mom, who did write a thesis, and it took her 15 years. And she was raising a child in the intermediary and getting a job. I was thinking about my dad, who finally did go to college at the age of 58 and got a degree, and is probably the brightest man I know. And if you asked him what his talents were, I think he'd say that he was a nice boy who could read and write. I think what Hampshire taught me is that there's no such thing as actually smart people, and that the most important thing is to learn how to teach yourself. That's what's important.